Well, Jets fans, we welcome you to the official Jets podcast, powered by Amazon Web Service in these strange times, to say the least. This is not normally the offseason tearful reunion that myself, Bob Wischusen, and Marty Lyons would have, but Marty, this is our chance to see each other virtually because we're all right now trying to deal with a brand new normal. How are you holding up?
You know what, Bob? I'm doing well. Every morning I get up, I have a conference call with the people over at Lantec. We're all working remotely from home. And, we still have our guys out there on the field, but, you just have to be patient and be understanding that, it's not just your life you're worried about your loved ones and even the strangers that you meet along the way. You don't want to infect them with a virus or get infected and then bring it home. So you're exactly right. This is not the normal, but hopefully sooner or later we'll be back to it.
How are all the kids holding up?
Everyone's doing well, Bob. I've got two boys that are doctors. As a matter of fact, Rocky just got out of quarantine down in Alabama. He actually diagnosed somebody down there with coronavirus. So he tested negative. Jesse's working hard down in South Carolina. She's kind of removed because she's a school teacher, and Luke is still going to work every day at Lockheed Martin. So knock on wood, everybody's healthy. And, you thank God for another day of an opportunity to make something out of your life.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing the same, holding up as best we can here. 5 kids all in the house, trapped, house arrest together, maximum family togetherness. Right now, the way I keep describing it to people is I've broken up a few, I guess what you would call like misdemeanor assaults. No one has committed a felony as of yet, but we're only about 10 days into what could be a long quarantine. So we'll see. About one note, and hopefully Jet fans can appreciate this. My wife, as we speak, is at a local college, head to toe, basically in a hazmat suit. She, of course, is a registered nurse. We have a friend around the corner, a really good friend of ours that's also a registered nurse. And the two of them were basically feeling guilty, like kind of tending to their own families. But so many of people that they know that have regular nursing jobs, certainly in in hospitals and in, emergency rooms, were being called upon to deal with this day by day, night by night. And so they called up another friend of ours in the local prosecutor's office and said, how can we help? And she immediately put the two of them in touch with a local contact, and they are volunteering at one of the New Jersey drive-up testing sites. So, for free, they're going to go there as many times as they're asked and put on all that protective gear and risk whatever health, they may have, and who knows what they might bring home, but it's certainly worth it to try and help so many people that right now are just trying to get tested.
Really is, Bob. I think everybody can do their part, whether it's what Julie's doing or what you and I are doing just by staying at home. Everybody has to do their part. And as frustrating as it is, we're actually saving lives. And if we can flatten that curve and find an answer to what's happening out there, and it's going to be a better result for all of us. But everybody has to be patient. They have to be understanding. And you just have to realize that you can make a difference. And to make a difference, all you have to do is care. And, all you have to do is stay at home. Stay at home and do your work and go out as little as possible and have as little as contact with other people as possible. And like everybody says, we'll make it through it. We made it through 9/11. We've made it through hurricanes. We made it through other difficult times in this nation. And this definitely is one that, we'll be able to tell our grandchildren about.
Yeah, somebody actually posted something funny, kind of one last note on this before we move on to football and maybe give people a distraction. But someone posted something funny to me the other day that, 15, 20 years from now, our kids will have kids, and it will be maybe a sunny Saturday afternoon, and their kids will be inside going, oh my God, I'm so bored. I want to go out. There's nothing to do. And our kids will turn to them and be like, let me tell you about the time I was trapped in my house for 8 weeks with my family. You get your butt outside. And this, this will be their moment, as it was described. This is like their I'm going to walk uphill both ways in 2 feet of snow moment, where they're going to, you can almost hear them as cranky parents someday yelling at their kids about what they're going through right now.
Well, you can take it that way, Bobby, or you can take it as quality time. I know you're on the road quite a bit during this part of the year or just finishing up basketball season. Basketball was canceled. So you got to spend some quality time with the kids playing hide and go seek. And you get to see everyday life that Julie has to put up with. So I'm sure it opened your
True.
eyes a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'm describing it as best I can as quality time. I don't think they're describing it that way, but that's the way I'll describe it.
Yeah,
Hey, look,
exactly.
if we can spin it to football, because certainly if you're a Jet fan, this should be something that distracts you. And people keep texting me and asking me, "What do you think so far?" So I'll just throw it at you, kind of wide angle lens, and we can kind of go through everything the Jets have done and what they still have to do. But what's your overall take on the way Joe Douglas has approached the offseason so far?
Well, you know what, Bobby? I like what he's doing. I think he's rebuilding that offensive line. He's going to bring in probably 5 new starters. When you look at the performance of that offensive line last year, they struggled. And they struggled because of injuries. 11 times out of 16 games, they had different lineups in. So you have to build the chemistry. You have to have the good luck on your side where you don't get injured. But when you look at an offense that only produced 17.3 points per game, that's 31st in the NFL. You're not going to win many games. The other stat that sticks out to you is they allowed 52 sacks. That's way too many in a 16 game schedule. And when your defense is out there trying to shut down the opposing offense and they're giving up 22 points per game, that's why you're 7-9. So I think number one, you got to build that offensive line. You got to build the chemistry, got to build that continuity. And these guys have got to play and practice together so they get a sense of, okay, how long do we have to hold our blocks for Le'Veon Bell? You look at Le'Veon Bell, 15 games last year. He only had 789 yards. That's not a typical Le'Veon Bell year. But the problem was, and you and I talked about it many times, you would see the hole open, and then because of his style of running, making a jump cut in the backfield, by the time he got to the hole was closed. So I like what Joe's doing, building it with the offensive line. Now he's going to have to go out and find some skilled players to help Sam Darnold.
Yep. What I'd also like, though, is he is still approaching this for the long term. He has not given anybody in this free agent market, I think, what anybody would consider an exorbitant contract. Most of the financial commitments can be just re-racked and start over next year. So he has rebuilt the offensive line, and I still think the biggest acquisition that they'll make will be in the draft. I don't think they're done building the offensive line. I don't think the group they've got right now is going to be the group. I personally would be very surprised if one of those tackles is there at 11 that they don't take him. I mean, I still think that they have clearly left a hole at starting tackle, where, if you were going to tell me right now, predict who their starters will be, I think Van Roten and Alex Lewis will be the starting guards. I think George Fant will probably be at one tackle. I think Connor McGovern's going to be the starting center. And I think their draft choice, whichever of those tackles in the first round that they take, will be the other starting tackle. So if you count Lewis as a new player, is that somebody that Joe Douglas brought in last year? He played 12 games, I think, last season. So you certainly got a chunk of time on the offensive line this year. But if you count him as a pseudo new player because he's someone Joe Douglas brought in, that will be a completely remade offensive line by Joe Douglas in 1 year. And I think he's doing exactly what he said he was going to. Every time I've talked to him, and I know you've had some conversations with Joe as well, he's made several points. He's a former offensive lineman. So he really believes that the game is still won and lost at the line of scrimmage. He was going to remake the offensive line, but he was never going to look at free agency as the quick fix. He was never going to go out and be a free spender. He was going to be someone that was going to set a value to a player. If the player could be had at the value they think is worth it, they would get that player. If the player exceeds the value, then they're not going to overpay. And I think that's what we saw with Robbie Anderson as well. They were going to be disciplined. They were going to offer the contract they thought was fair. If it didn't work out, they move on to the next guy. And the second wave of free agency, which is where they made most of their acquisitions, that's normally where you get bargain players. And that's what they got. But the fact that he has not overspent in free agency, is building the offensive line, but I think really still believes that the draft is how you truly build your team back up. I mean, everything that he's done is, I think, exactly the way he said he was going to do it all of the times that I've had a chance to talk to him. You probably feel the same way. I know you've had a chance to spend some time chatting with him before games also.
Yeah, you know what, Bobby? I like Joe Douglas. I think coming off that tree of Ozzie Newsome, he learned a lot by staying down there in Baltimore and then going out to Chicago and then to Denver. And then, what he built down there for the Eagles. He's just done a tremendous job. Excuse me. But I think the big difference is now that there's a line of communication open between your GM and your coaches and Adam Gase, the head coach, and your scouting department. You just don't have a GM behind closed doors making decisions without the input of the coaching staff, and I think that puts everybody on the same page.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. And, he has even gone out and gotten a couple of guys defensively, adding Owasser, the linebacker, this week as well, that I think he's doing whatever he can to get players that he thinks can be, whether it's kind of a quote unquote, the way Bill Parcells used to describe them, hold the fort guys, or guys like he did with Pierre Desir, the corner that was let go by Indy. Bring a guy in and show me. Show me you're worth more than what we're going to give you for 1 year. You're going to have a lot of very motivated players that are on either literally 1-year contracts or pseudo 1-year contracts because they can be let go next year without the Jets really owing them anything. You're going to have a draft class that's going to compete with some of these guys. And I think that, Joe Douglas is looking at this. I've said this before. Jet fans want to hear the word rebuild and they want to hear the word patience, the way that like a 4-year-old wants to see broccoli on their dinner plate. They don't want to see it. It doesn't taste good. They'd rather have brownies and ice cream, but the broccoli's good for them and you have to eat it. And even if you don't like it, it's kind of the way it goes. This is these are the vitamins that you have to have in your body to become, a bigger, stronger person. Kind of the way the draft has to be the broccoli. You've got to eat that. You've got to have that kind of infuse a football team with young players that now become your foundation. And you can tell with what Joe Douglas is doing right now in the first year of, personally for him, a 6-year contract, he is sending the message to Jet fans that just because John Idzik's rebuild and Mike McCagnon's rebuild didn't work doesn't A, become his fault, and B, doesn't change the fact that they have to rebuild. That over the last 6 or 7 years, the draft hasn't produced more than a handful of legitimate players for the Jets. And, 9 times out of 10, a team that either competes for a championship or even is, a regular participant in the playoffs, the foundation of all of that comes from the draft and comes from drafting those players and developing them on your roster. And he still, I think, is being very disciplined at taking that longer view.
Well, one thing I know, Bob, you've been home too long and around the kids too often, because now you're looking at free agency like broccoli. My wife tried to feed me broccoli for the last 3 days. I can eat it once. That's it. I don't want it 2 nights in a row. Maybe it's good for me. No, I don't want broccoli 2 nights in a row. But, I think Joe Douglas he's got a handle on it. And for what the team did in the second part of the season, they started off 1-7, and you lose Sam Darnold, and then you lose C.J. Mosley, and of course during the preseason you lose Avery Williamson. You lost so much on that defensive side of the ball, and think about the job that Greg Williams did as the defense coordinator. The big number that sits with me, Bobby, is only 35 sacks, and only a third of those coming from the defensive line. They've got to find a way to get those guys up front to get to the quarterback. Nobody's going to be as fortunate as the team that I played on when you had Mark Gastineau on one side, Joe Klecko on the other. They both come up with 20 sacks. You can't double team them both. So Abdul and I, all we had to do was tie up the middle, and we got our share of sacks. But somehow you're going to have to find a defensive lineman or two that can beat the guy in front of him one-on-one. You have a guy in Greg Williams that's going to take the best personnel and he's going to play them. He doesn't care who you are. He's going to take the good players and make them great, the great players and make them superstars. Look what he did with Jamal Adams last year. putting him up on the line of scrimmage. Comes away with 6.5 sacks, had the best year of his career. But Greg has that tendency. If you're not going to play, if you're not going to compete, guess what? You're not going to play.
Wischusen and Marty Lyons on the Official Jets podcast. And obviously you can, join us on the Official Jets podcast, wherever you download your podcasts. And, it's also really interesting, I think, wondering what all of this should and ought to mean for Sam Darnold. There's such a trickle-down effect of if the offensive line is better, that makes the running game that much more effective for Le'Veon Bell. If the running game is that much more effective for Le'Veon Bell, how much more effective Sam Darnold can be. He's so good. Play action, misdirection, moving him out of the pocket, all of the different things you can do when a defense is afraid of the run game. And if he just has some health around him as well. I mean, think of the 2 tight ends the Jets should start the year next year with if Chris Herndon can come back and be a healthy player. And the other thing I think the Jets will do, we've been talking about some of these, kind of low impact, 1-year commitment, prove it to me contracts that they've signed. Rashad Perriman, who comes in at receiver, who had 30 or so less targets than Robbie Anderson last year and still produced basically the same numbers that Robbie Anderson put up. He comes in on a 1-year contract. I fully expect the Jets with the 11th pick to take a tackle, but I also fully expect that with their 2nd round pick and maybe one of the 3rd round picks, I think they're going to look at those spots at wide receiver as well, because this is a draft where wide receiver may be as deep as it's ever been. I mean, this is a transformational group at wide receiver where you're going to get a 1st round talent in the 2nd or 3rd round. You think about in totality what all of this could mean for Sam Darnold in his 3rd year. And, this should be a year where he, A, has to stay healthy and play 16 games. We haven't seen that yet. But B, should take a step to a different level than we've seen him play at so far.
Bobby, I think he has to take that step. He only played in 13 games last year, 19 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. And when you look at the timing of some of those interceptions, you just kind of hold your head and go, no, why did you throw that? But he's going to learn. I think that he's got the command of the huddle. He's got the respect of his teammates. And I really think he's stepping up in the locker room to become a voice and be one of those leaders. But, this is not one of those years where we say, hey, Sam, you got to do it. You know what? It's your 3rd season. You were a number 1 draft choice. You got to go out there and play. Big thing is if you're not healthy, you know what? You only play 13 games. Last year, when you come down with mono after the first game, you have a 16-point lead against Buffalo in the 4th quarter. All of a sudden, you start to get a little bit more fatigued than you felt, in the 3rd quarter, and then you get banged up, and then you don't play for a couple weeks. That happens. So I think you can't look in the past. We just got to look in the forward. I think everybody should be excited about this year. It all depends, too, Bobby, about how quick they can get into camp, how quick that they can start working together, get everybody on that same page. I don't like the collective bargaining. I don't like the way the Jets have gone into the preseason games and how they approached it with a lot of guys not playing, building that chemistry. And then all of a sudden, week 1, you're supposed to throw it in there like a light switch, turn it on. You need to get in playing shape, whether it's 1 quarter or 2 quarter, and play in the first 3 preseason games. Then you want to sit out in the 4th, okay. But you got to get playing time, especially when you have so many new faces.
Yeah, and I think the point you made about the offensive line specifically, like, to me, that's going to be a huge – I don't know how you would approach this if you were coaching the offensive line, but if I gave you 5 new guys and I said, all right, not only have you guys never played collectively before, but we're going to collapse the offseason and we're going to give you, instead of X number of practices, take that and cut it in half. Or instead of, who knows how deep into the offseason we're going to go before we're all told you can go back to normal. You guys can all be around each other. You can play a contact sport. It's safe. So just for the sake of argument, if this drags into summer and training camp gets cut in half, or maybe the preseason gets cut in half. How would you approach that with the offensive line, knowing that those 5 guys have to have chemistry that's different than anybody, probably any other position group on the field?
Well, first of all, I'd get them in the playbooks right now so that they know the terminology, they know the plays, and all you have to do is eventually, walk your way through the playbook so that you understand the different terminology, you understand what you're supposed to be doing when a certain play is called. You can never have a game situation at practice. They just don't practice that way anymore. I don't want to say it's two-hand touch, but there's no really, you got the guys up front trying to make a hit, and then you got a running back running through a hole, and then he keeps running. Well, those days of hard-nosed practices are done. So I don't know how you learn how to run and how you learn how to tackle unless you practice it. And unfortunately, that's when you start a season, you see a lot of missed tackles. You see a lot of broken plays. But to win in the NFL, you got to start fast and you got to finish strong. And, we're going into our 19th year together, Bobby, and, 1-7 at the halfway point, you kind of say, well, we're playing this year out, because even if you go 8-0, 9-7 is not going to do much in the AFC, and especially in the AFC East. Now that Tom Brady's gone, that opens the door to everybody else saying, well, Tom Brady was New England Patriots. That's why they kept winning. He's not there anymore. There's no more excuses. Maybe it's Bill Belichick's system, but you have an opportunity to go out there and perform and to be at the top of the AFC East. But right now, I think Buffalo might be that team that we should all be worried about.
19 years in, we still like each other.
Yeah, that's right. I remember 19 years ago when we did our first game down in Baltimore. It was a preseason game, and it was. I didn't know you. I had listened to you when you were on the Fan, and now to see us together 19 years later, to see the families be able to come close and see the kids grow up. I mean, that is something special, and I think that's what the game brings to each individual. It brings memories. It brings. That camaraderie around with one another, in the locker room. And I think that's what everybody misses right now is being around, teammates, because there's no better teammate than to sit around and you tell stories and you start to talk about families and you start to talk about, wow, 19 years already. Where did it all go?
Yeah. And we all just want sports to come back. Not just football, but sports, after 9/11, I think was so important to the healing of the city. During the crash in 2008 and 2009, sports gave you a distraction every day and every night to kind of get away from, you didn't have to look at your 401k every day because you had a game to watch and that would distract you for a little while. And right now, we are all going through this collectively, but B, all of our distractions have even been taken away from us. And I'm sure sports will probably be the last thing to come back. I don't know. I would think that we are probably headed at some point towards a baseball season, maybe at some point towards the resumption of the hockey and basketball seasons. And I think we'll have a football season. But in what form? Will it all be abbreviated? Will we be playing in empty stadiums for a while? That is possible as well. I just, I don't know. And I think none of us do. And that's obviously, that's on the back burner. Right now we have to beat this virus. We have to keep as many people healthy and out of the healthcare system as possible. And hopefully everyone is doing what they're supposed to do and socially distancing and being responsible and taking this thing as seriously as we should. But in our world, I'm looking forward to when we're going to get games back. And I can't wait for the football season. It's March. We haven't even had the draft yet. But because we have nothing else to pay attention to sports-wise right now, I'm ready for the football season to start.
Well, I have to agree with you, Bob, on everything you just said. I think that we all miss sports. You put on ESPN and you're seeing reruns. I was fortunate. I hit ESPN the other day and I saw the 1985 Chicago Bears 30-30 show. And it ended up with Buddy Ryan sending out a letter to all of his players. And his last line was, hey, you guys are my heroes. And we all know how that ended for Buddy Ryan. But you know what? We miss the stories coming out of the NFL. We miss the stories coming out of the world of sports. So many people from the world of sports are trying to touch people and give them the right direction in life. And we're missing that right now because there is a bigger issue that all of us can make a contribution to. And the biggest way that we can is stay at home. Stay at home, and every now and then, pick up the phone when you want to tell somebody how important they are in your life, or you just want to check in on them. Pick up the phone and just say, "Hey, you know what? I was thinking about you today. How you feeling?" That's it. And
no doubt.
hello goes a long way.
All right, that's Marty Lyons. I'm Bob Wischusen. Thanks for joining us. The official Jets podcast, powered by Amazon Web Services. And Jet fans, stay healthy, stay safe. We will talk to you soon.